Kay and I recently started to check out our ancestry. We both came from Germany, my ancestors in the 1830s and Kay's in the 1850s, and both families settled in Marion County. As part of our research, Kay, her cousin Roz, and I traveled to Germany and visited our ancestral homes. What struck us was how people, places, and old stories created links that seemed to tie us all together. It all starts in southern Germany in what is now the state of Baden-Württemberg, around the city of Pforzheim. My family, the Graceleys, immigrated in 1830 from Elmendingen, a tiny village on the west side of Pforzheim. The family records for this church are on the internet, and I can trace my ancestors back to 1542. The men seem to come from Elmendingen, and their wives came from the surrounding villages, each about a kilometer away. Kay's ancestor, Jacob KAELBER, came from the east side of Pforzheim, from the village of Uedingen. His wives came from the next village down the road, Kisselbrunn. The church in Kisselbrunn where they worshipped is still standing. Built in 1408, it's been redecorated many times. The wall paintings dating from 1450 were covered over at some point and rediscovered in 1972. Since we were in town, we decided to take the opportunity to go to church on Sunday, even though we didn't understand anything except when they were reciting the Lord's Prayer. It was at church that we met Marcus Ziegler, who is related 8 generations back. He and his wife invited us into their home to check out the family tree on his computer. Did you notice I said Jacob's wives, as in plural, came from Kisselbrunn? After they immigrated, his first wife, Carolyn, died, and he returned to Germany and married his wife's sister, Heinricha, who was 21 years his junior.
Jacob KAELBER came over in 1853, and he brought with him his first wife, Carolyn. And she was here with him until, with birthing, she had a baby that was deceased, and she died. So he goes back to Germany. And Jay says he must have been wealthy because he crossed the ocean so many times. But anyway, he goes back and gets Heinricha and brings her back to America with him. Now, he had 6 children with Carolyn, and they were Dan and Jake and Uncle Chris, and then 3 girls, Aunt Kate, Christine, and Josephine. And then 2, my dad, Grandpa Charlie KAELBER, and Aunt Liddy Wick were children of his second wife, Heinricha. I never saw him because he died before I was born. I did see Grandma KAELBER up until I was 5 years old, which I don't remember too much then. Grandma made her home with Aunt Liddy Wick, and we would go over ever so often and help take care of her. She was a thin lady, not very heavy. She spoke German all the time. She didn't know English. And of course, they spoke German around me, and I didn't know German.
Although schools were an integrating force in America, the German immigrants were proud of their heritage, so they used their native language at home. They felt no one learns a language without also learning the character, customs, and habits of the people who speak it.
Oh, yes. They spoke German a lot, and
Who spoke German?
Mom and Dad. Well, Harry and Oscar, because they tell that when they went to school when they were 5, that they couldn't speak anything but German. They had to switch over in school.
Another part of the culture they brought with them was their church.
The Windfall Lutheran Church would have every other Sunday a German sermon. And then the other Sundays they would have English sermons.
German American clubs helped preserve German customs, festivals, music, and the moderate use of alcoholic beverages.
The Deutschebund was a German club that met in Marion. Jacob belonged to the Deutschebund, and he would go every Saturday up to Marion to meet with the Deutschebund. And my dad would hitch up the horse and get it ready for him to drive to Marion. And when he came back, my dad would go out and take care of the horse.
It seems that Jacob was an enterprising farmer who did more than just visit at the German club meetings.
I remember them telling that Grandpa had, Jacob KAELBER, would buy a barrel of whiskey. Can you imagine a barrel of whiskey? And would sell it to the different people. I suppose that was his income a little.
Pforzheim is the heart of the jewelry and goldsmithing industry in Germany, and Jacob had taken up the local trade.
Jacob KAELBER was a goldsmith, and he made things of gold. He made a pair of earrings that he wore. They were just round, simple earrings that he made and wore them.
This brings up the question, why did a German goldsmith end up farming when he immigrated to America? We met a local historian, Frau Babel Rudin, in the village of Kisselbronn, where Jacob's wives were from.
They are both. They are goldsmiths and farmers, always. Yes, and though they had the possibility in times when all is going down to return on their farms. On the time when the industry goes very good, the wives, the children, all the old are handling the farm.
He ended up farming, one of his trades back in Germany, because that was the best option open to him in Marion County. In Germany, Jacob lived in Uerdingen and would either walk or ride the train into Pforzheim each day to work. These factory workers were known as rattlers, since the nails on their boots rattled down the streets when they came and went to work.
Yes, here you see the rattlers.
Yes.
Yes. And that's very typical for them. You know, there's low and high. Yes, and when the industry goes down, they must reduce the workers. When the industry goes high, they pay good. But in the time when it goes low, they return, and then it was not rentable, were always poor. Maybe the food doesn't come, I don't know, but they are always poor.
Bad harvests led a lot of German farmers to immigrate. These poor economic conditions drove peasants and artisans to seek their fortune in America. In 1846, 95,000 Germans immigrated. In 1847, 110,000 left. In 1848 and 49, there was a revolution in Germany. The state of Baden was in the forefront of the agitation, which led to an armed insurrection. The Grand Duke of Baden finally joined with Bavaria in requesting the armed intervention of Prussia. From this moment, the revolution in Baden, as well as the rest of Germany, was doomed. The failed revolution was followed by a period of political repression. Not wanting to endure censorship and harassment by the political police, many immigrated to America. In 1851, there were 113,000 immigrants. In 1852, 162,000. In 1853, 163,000. And in 1854, 300,000.
And the repression after the revolution has been very hard. And though many people thought 20 years, this immigration is the cause, is political.
Frau Rudin also introduced us to a new term, chain migration, which was probably why so many German immigrants ended up in Marion County.
That's what that?
Jewelry.
Jewelry?
No. this
Necklace?
Necklace.
Chain.
Chain.
And a chain migration. A migration like a chain. You understand?
One person after
Yes.
another.
Yes. That's chain migration. This is very typical for immigration. That one is going, or family is going, and then they are coming the others. Yes.
Right.
Maybe if they are successful. Yes. Or they say you're not successful, or they but come and help.
Right.
May all be. Yes.
Times were hard, and often the villagers got tired of folks that didn't pull their own weight. Sometimes prisoners and other individuals were sent to America at the village's expense.
All those who are social ballast.
Not good. Social.
Social ballast. A ballast for, you know what ballast?
Ballast on a ship.
Ballast?
Ballast on a boat is
The weight.
dead weight.
You pay the passage,
The rich did. The rich paid the passage.
not the rich village.
The village.
The village.
The village, yes, yes. Not the rich, yes, maybe the rich, the money came from,
Right, right.
but the village
To get rid of them.
pays the passage.
Passage.
They must pay all. They must pay the clothes. They must pay all. They must pay the night pot,
Take your chamber pot.
chamber pot.
Yeah.
Yes, this
That the village would pay for.
all. They must pay all. They must have this all. And also, if you have one who has been in prison, yes, who did not good. And the village must pay for the prison. Yes? And they wouldn't like to pay for the prison. And they said, why?
Send them to America.
Send them to America. I find it wonderful, this method. Where's the big one? Yes, and here we have one who did not good. Yes, he would not work. He would not work. He would not nothing.
His name is Wachter. You have the, yeah.
Yes, here. Yes, this is a Friedrich Wächter.
Yeah.
He was a social problem. And Friedrich Wächter, and here is all described what they must do, what they must pay. Yes? The ticket and the toilet pot and all. Transport and this is the parliament of Kittelborn who must sign, and then they went with one of the parliament. he went with this Mr. Wächter to Strasbourg, and it was previewed that he had to go to the ship, but he fled.
Ran away.
Yes.
Fled.
But he was so idiotic, he returned to Kittelborn, yes, I didn't go. He didn't know where to go. And then he returned to Kielbronn.
Frau Ruden's stories were very entertaining, but she also helped us make a few connections that we hadn't anticipated. For instance, around 1700, an informal census was done in Kisselbronn. In Frau Ruden's book, she uses this census to create a map of Kisselbronn with a list of who's living in each house.
When the new pastor came in this year, and he went around and for looking who is here. He didn't know, and he went around
Okay.
house to house, and in each house he put the names and the dates. And after this I have made like this. He began here, and he lived here. He lived here, anyway, here. Eins, here. And here he went, eins here. And he lived here, and he went here.
By chance, Kay and Roz got their picture taken on almost the exact spot where one of their ancestors lived over 200 years ago. One of the most astonishing discoveries was that from 1700 to 1800 in the state of Württemberg, the populace had to list everything they owned when they got married and when they died. These records were kept in the Rathaus, or town hall, and these records still exist for Kisselbronn. Frau Ruden took us up to the top floor of the Rathaus to show us the actual records of Johann Wachter and Christina Kaufmann, ancestors who got married in 1766. The 8 pages listed all their clothes, tools, land, debts, and money owed to them.
So, and here's a man's clothes.
Men's clothing?
Yes.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
And his for his carpenter, what he need to work.
Tools.
Yes. And then to go to bed.
Bedding clothes. The
Bed
clothes.
Bed clothes. Right?
And what is this then?
The Wurst. What is Würste? Yes.
And that would be Deutschmarks?
That's not Marx, that's older. That's in this
Older.
period.
Okay.
Yes. And there is what they had to pay to any who their children, what's it, children?
For their education? No.
No, what you have to pay if you have anyone, your debts.
Your debts.
Oh, your debts.
Also, that
Oh,
debts.
my gosh.
Yes. And that what he has to debts to get
Oh, people
when
that
he
owe
lent
him.
when he lent. Which is,
And
now survive. And he has
land.
land. You see, many.
Oh my gosh.
Not many, but
Oh,
she
no?
has.
Okay.
She's young, and now she has book, Gesang, Sangbuch, and her clothes.
Okay.
Oh,
She's a wealthy woman.
and for the bath also, and she has also for the kitchen all the things. She has all these things. She has nothing from this sort. Here all, and she has also lent something, and now what they on counts. So, and then summa, and here they write now. Yes.
By looking at the list, Frau Ruden could even fill us in on how these two probably got together.
He is a carpenter who is not master. You must travel
Oh.
with your from one to the next master.
Oh, to learn from, yes.
The typical.
You learn from many.
Yes, and it's typical. He has nothing, no ground,
No land.
no land. He is traveling. Yes, and now he has found a wife. Has land. Yes, it's a typical construction.
She has the land.
She's sitting here and has land, and he's traveling.
The records show that the Duke of Württemberg owed Johann Bochter 36 gold coins. It seems as though Johann had done work on the Duke's Ludwigsburg residence, so he took a tour of the Schloss Ludwigsburg, which is just 40 miles from Kisselbronn. The Ludwigsburg royal residence started out as the Duke's hunting lodge. He originally lived in Stuttgart, but eventually added on to the lodge and it became his full-time residence. It's very much like Versailles, the French royal palace in Paris. One of the features of Ludwigsburg is its theater. Built in the 1750s, it fell into disuse around 1850 and was restored in the 1990s. What's interesting is that the wooden machines used to change sets are original to the 1750s. Johann worked on the Schloss Theater. It's quite possible that as a carpenter he had worked on these very machines. Frau Rudin is also a theater history professor and author, and she's written articles about this particular theater. She said that some of Johann's handiwork was probably still being used in the theater. What Kay and I have found is that the stories about our ancestors, from people like Pauline and Frau Rudin, and the places like Marion County, Pforzheim, Uerdingen, Kisselbronn, and Ludwigsburg, create links that lead to a patchwork of sites and facts that create a wonderful history of our families. And no, we haven't found any links between our families who lived only 12 miles apart back in Germany. As far as we know, we aren't cousins.